When we consider why some of the most emotionally intelligent, kind-hearted, and introspective individuals repeatedly find themselves drawn to emotionally unavailable partners, the answer lies deep in human psychology, attachment theory, and emotional dynamics. This isn't a matter of weakness or poor judgment, but rather a reflection of how the most giving people often respond to subtle emotional cues that others might overlook. Empaths, those who are exceptionally attuned to the emotions of others, are often hailed as the most compassionate and intuitive among us. They pick up on energy shifts, understand unspoken feelings, and instinctively want to help or soothe emotional pain. Because of these qualities, they are highly sensitive to the inner worlds of others. Emotional unavailability, ironically, can present as a mystery or a puzzle to solve. When someone seems closed off, distant, or struggling internally, the empath senses it. But instead of turning away, as many people might, the empath often leans in. They feel a drive to heal, support, or understand the person who is emotionally shut down. They sense the pain behind the walls and believe that if they just love hard enough, show enough care, or create a safe enough space, the emotionally unavailable person will eventually open up. In addition to empathy, emotional intelligence plays a major role. People with high emotional intelligence are skilled in managing their own emotions, understanding others' emotional states, and navigating interpersonal dynamics with nuance. This makes them excellent communicators and peacemakers in relationships. However, these same strengths can sometimes become liabilities in relationships with emotionally unavailable partners. Because emotionally intelligent individuals tend to be patient, reflective, and skilled in regulating emotional turbulence, they often end up carrying the emotional burden of the relationship. When their partner withdraws, shuts down, or avoids vulnerability, the emotionally intelligent person may interpret this not as a red flag, but as a sign that more compassion or understanding is needed. There's also the factor of hope, the belief that with enough time and care, the emotionally unavailable partner will change. This hope is not naive. It is grounded in the experience that emotional growth is possible, that people are not static, and that love can be a transformative force. But this belief, while beautiful, can become a trap when it leads to excusing consistent patterns of emotional avoidance, neglect, or disconnection. Empaths also struggle with a deep internal drive to avoid conflict or rejection. In relationships, this often manifests as a tendency to over-accommodate or rationalize the behavior of their partner to preserve the connection. If their partner is distant, they might think they've had a tough past, or they just need time to feel safe. While these thoughts may be valid to some degree, they can also prevent the empath from recognizing when they are being emotionally starved. What further complicates this dynamic is the emotionally unavailable person's unconscious attraction to empathic individuals. People who avoid vulnerability are often drawn to those who offer emotional safety and depth, but only up to the point where their own emotional discomfort is not triggered. When an empath tries to get closer, the emotionally unavailable partner might pull back, becoming colder or more evasive. This creates a push-pull dynamic where the empath feels they must work even harder to earn love, and the unavailable partner remains locked in a self-protective state. Moreover, cultural and social narratives sometimes romanticize this dynamic. Think of how often we see stories about someone who is damaged being healed by the unwavering love of a good person. These narratives can reinforce the belief that staying in a one-sided relationship is noble or heroic. But in real life, such dynamics are emotionally draining and unsustainable. No amount of empathy or intelligence can force someone to become emotionally present if they are not ready or willing to be vulnerable. The sad irony is that those who give the most are often those who receive the least in emotionally unavailable partnerships. They become emotional caretakers instead of equal participants. They often suppress their own needs, fearing that expressing them might push the partner further away. This self-silencing reinforces a cycle where the emotionally unavailable partner becomes even less responsive, and the empath becomes more anxious, lonely, or even resentful. Understanding this pattern is not about placing blame, but about raising awareness. It is crucial for empathic and emotionally intelligent individuals to realize that their gifts should not be exploited. Their compassion, while admirable, must be paired with discernment. Emotional availability is not a luxury in a relationship, it is a basic requirement. When someone consistently avoids intimacy, dismisses your emotional needs, or keeps you at arm's length, that is not a reflection of your inadequacy or failure to love them enough. It is a signal that they are not in a place to give what you deserve: mutual connection, emotional safety, and openness. The good news is that once this pattern is recognized, it can be broken. Emotional intelligence can then be used not just to understand others, but to advocate for oneself. Empathy can be extended inward, towards self, care, and boundary setting. In doing so, the most emotionally intelligent and kind individuals can begin attracting and choosing partners who are as available, present, and invested as they are. When we try to understand why kind, emotionally intelligent, or best individuals often find themselves repeatedly drawn to emotionally unavailable partners, we must turn our attention to the psychology of attachment. Much of what we seek in adult relationships stems from unconscious imprints laid down in childhood. These early blueprints, known as attachment styles, influence how we perceive love, safety, closeness, and conflict. For many people, especially those who grew up navigating emotional unpredictability, the familiar becomes the comfortable even when that familiarity includes emotional distance, inconsistency, or neglect. Children are incredibly adaptive, and they learn early on what they must do to maintain connection with caregivers. In homes where love and attention were conditional, perhaps based on achievements, pleasing behavior, or emotional caretaking, children often learn to suppress their own needs to maintain peace. They may become hyper-aware of others' moods, trying to keep the emotional environment stable. This creates a form of internalized messaging: my needs are less important, or if I want love, I have to work for it. These beliefs, though not always consciously remembered, travel with us into adulthood and shape how we bond with romantic partners. For example, someone with an anxious, preoccupied attachment style, often formed through inconsistent caregiving, may find themselves repeatedly attracted to emotionally unavailable people. These relationships mimic the unpredictability they experienced growing up: moments of closeness followed by withdrawal, affection followed by coldness. Though painful, this pattern is familiar. Subconsciously, they may believe that if they can just get it right, this time they'll finally receive the steady love they always wanted. The unavailable partner becomes a stand-in for the emotionally distant caregiver, and the relationship becomes a reenactment of the old wound, a chance to rewrite the past. On the other hand, individuals with avoidant tendencies might also be drawn to emotionally unavailable people because they fear true intimacy themselves. Even though they long for connection, they may feel threatened when someone gets too close, so they unconsciously seek out partners who can't or won't fully connect. That way, the risk of emotional overwhelm is avoided. This dynamic can also play out between two people, one anxious and one avoidant, where the anxious partner keeps reaching for closeness, while the avoidant partner keeps pulling away, creating a painful cycle that neither person fully understands but both feel trapped in. Complicating matters further is the fact that emotionally unavailable partners often present with traits that are initially attractive to those with insecure attachment patterns. They may appear independent, composed, mysterious, or self-sufficient. For someone who has been conditioned to chase approval or work for love, this type of partner triggers a familiar pursuit dynamic. They feel challenged and excited, misinterpreting emotional unavailability as depth or strength. What is actually emotional detachment can be mistaken for confidence or maturity, when in fact it is a sign of emotional disconnection or fear of intimacy. Those who are kind and emotionally generous are particularly vulnerable to these dynamics. They are often the fixers or healers at individuals who feel responsible for other people's well-being. When faced with emotional unavailability, their instinct is not to walk away but to try harder. They want to understand, to be patient, to be the exception that breaks through the other person's walls. This is not a flaw in their character, it's a learned survival strategy from a time when they had to adapt to love that was conditional or unpredictable. But this same strategy in adulthood often leads them into one-sided or emotionally draining relationships. Another critical factor is self-concept. People who grew up feeling they had to earn love may not fully believe they deserve love that is freely given. If someone comes along who is emotionally available, consistent, and open, it might feel foreign, even uncomfortable. They might interpret healthy emotional expression as too much or too intense, because it doesn't match the emotional tone they are used to. They may even sabotage these healthier connections, not because they don't want love, but because deep down they don't recognize it as love. Instead, they're drawn back to what they've always known: emotional distance, inconsistency, or the need to prove themselves. Recognizing these patterns is essential for growth. It allows individuals to step back and see their relational habits not as failures, but as echoes of earlier emotional experiences. Healing begins when they realize that their attraction to emotionally unavailable partners isn't random, it's a reflection of old wounds trying to find resolution. But true healing doesn't come from repeating the past in hopes of a different outcome. It comes from acknowledging the past and choosing differently in the present. This process often requires intentional self-reflection, therapy, and education. Learning about attachment theory can be eye-opening. It helps people understand that the longing they feel, the pain they endure, and the patterns they repeat have roots, and those roots can be gently untangled. As they begin to prioritize emotional safety, self-respect, and mutual effort in relationships, they start to rewire their emotional expectations. They begin to seek out and accept partners who offer consistency, openness, and emotional maturity. Ultimately, the role of early attachment styles and unresolved emotional patterns cannot be overstated. They are the silent architects behind many adult relationship choices, but with awareness and self-compassion, these patterns can be changed. The best people, those who love deeply, give generously, and feel intensely, deserve relationships that reflect those same values back to them. When they heal from the past and learn to recognize what true emotional availability looks like, they no longer settle for relationships that drain them. Instead, they begin to build ones that nourish, support, and truly connect. In relationships, kindness is a beautiful and necessary quality. It fosters compassion, patience, forgiveness, and understanding, all traits that help build trust and emotional intimacy. However, kindness alone is not enough to sustain a healthy connection, especially when it is misapplied. One of the most important lessons that emotionally intelligent and kind-hearted individuals must learn is that being kind does not mean ignoring red flags. In fact, kindness without boundaries can quickly turn into self-abandonment. It's essential to distinguish between healthy compassion and enabling behavior. Red flags in a relationship are early warning signs, indicators that something may be emotionally imbalanced, unhealthy, or potentially harmful. These red flags can appear in many forms: emotional withdrawal, inconsistency, a refusal to communicate openly, a pattern of avoiding responsibility, manipulation, or a general unwillingness to invest emotionally. Unfortunately, individuals who are deeply empathetic or driven by a strong moral compass often struggle to respond appropriately to these signs. Their instinct is to give people the benefit of the doubt, to extend grace, or to interpret others' harmful behaviors through a lens of past trauma, fear, or insecurity. While it's commendable to seek understanding, it becomes problematic when that understanding causes them to excuse behavior that harms their emotional well-being. Many people confuse kindness with tolerance. They believe that to be loving is to endure to accept people as they are, even when they are hurting them. This belief is often reinforced by cultural and social narratives that glorify unconditional love at the expense of personal boundaries. But the truth is, Authentic kindness includes kindness toward oneself. It includes the ability to say, I see your pain, but I will not let you treat me in a way that diminishes my dignity. Boundaries are not barriers to love, they are the foundation of healthy relationships. Without them, kindness turns into people pleasing, and emotional connection devolves into emotional sacrifice. Ignoring red flags often stems from a deep hope that things will change. The emotionally generous person may believe that their love or support will eventually inspire the other person to grow, become more open, or face their own fears. But this mindset assumes a level of responsibility that is not theirs to carry. Change must come from within. You cannot heal someone into being emotionally available. You cannot wait or wish someone into being ready for the kind of relationship you deserve. Overlooking red flags does not strengthen a relationship. It only delays the inevitable disappointment when the patterns repeat and the emotional needs remain unmet. Another reason kind individuals often overlook red flags is fear of conflict, fear of being perceived as unkind, or fear of losing the connection altogether. This fear can silence them when they should speak up or paralyze them when they should walk away. They may rationalize the other person's behavior. They're just scared of intimacy, or they've been through so much, or no one's perfect. And while these statements may carry truth, they do not justify patterns of emotional unavailability or disrespect. Recognizing red flags isn't about judging someone's character. It's about honoring your own emotional needs and being realistic about compatibility. Being kind does not require sacrificing your voice, your needs, or your emotional safety. It's possible to be both compassionate and clear, both supportive and self-respecting. Kindness is not about making yourself small to make others comfortable. It is not about absorbing someone else's pain while ignoring your own. True kindness means having the courage to say, I care about you, but this dynamic isn't healthy for me. It means noticing the red flags and responding to them not with blame or aggression, but with wisdom and self-awareness. Education plays a crucial role in helping people shift this mindset. Learning about emotional health, relational boundaries, and the difference between empathy and self-sacrifice empowers individuals to act differently. Emotional literacy, the ability to identify, understand, and manage emotions, helps people recognize when they're being mistreated or when a relationship is emotionally imbalanced. It also helps them understand the difference between empathy and enabling. Empathy says, I understand why you feel this way. Enabling says, I'll ignore my needs to make you comfortable. The latter may feel like kindness in the moment, but over time, it creates resentment, burnout, and emotional depletion. Being kind does not mean being blind. Emotionally available, mature partners will respect boundaries and welcome open communication. They will not punish you for expressing your needs or identifying what makes you uncomfortable. In fact, one of the most revealing red flags is how someone responds when you express discomfort. If they become defensive, dismissive, or manipulative, that is a clear indication that emotional safety may not be present. Conversely, if they listen, validate, and engage in mutual problem solving, that's a green flag, a sign of emotional maturity and relational potential. Ultimately, the message is this: kindness is powerful, but it must be directed wisely. It must be grounded in self-awareness and balanced by boundaries. Ignoring red flags does not make you noble or loving. It makes you vulnerable to emotional harm. And you deserve relationships that are not only kind, but also safe, reciprocal, and emotionally fulfilling. When you learn to recognize red flags and respond with clarity and self-respect, your kindness becomes a strength that elevates both you and the relationships you allow into your life. Many people believe that love is about selflessness, compromise, and sacrifice, and to an extent, that's true. However, when love consistently requires you to silence your own needs, suppress your emotional discomfort, or shrink yourself to maintain a connection, it's no longer healthy. In emotionally unbalanced relationships, especially those involving emotionally unavailable partners, growth begins the moment a person recognizes their own self, self-worth and starts setting boundaries. This is a vital turning point, especially for those who have spent much of their lives giving more than they receive. Self-worth is the internal sense that you are valuable, deserving of love, and entitled to emotional safety. It's not about arrogance or entitlement, but about a quiet confidence in your humanity. Many kind, generous people struggle with fully embracing their worth because of past experiences that taught them love must be earned, that conflict means rejection, or that their needs are burdensome. These deeply held beliefs often originate in childhood and are reinforced by adult relationships that replicate the same emotional dynamics. If you spent your early years feeling overlooked, unimportant, or only valued for what you could do for others, you may now instinctively overextend yourself in relationships to deserve affection. This is why recognizing self-worth is a powerful act of growth. It shifts the entire framework through which you see love. Rather than viewing relationships as something you must constantly work for or fix, you begin to view them as partnerships rooted in mutual respect, emotional availability, and balance. You start to believe that your feelings matter, your boundaries are valid, and you are not too much, too sensitive, or too needy for wanting a connection that feels safe and reciprocal. But self-worth without boundaries is incomplete. Boundaries are the actionable expression of self-respect. They are not walls that shut people out, but guidelines that protect your energy, time, and emotional space. They say, "This is how I deserve to be treated, and this is what I will no longer accept." Many people, especially those who are deeply compassionate, struggle to set boundaries because they fear conflict, guilt, or abandonment. They worry that if they say no, ask for space, or express discomfort, the other person will leave. But what's often missed is that relationships built on the fear of loss are already unstable. When you're constantly managing someone else's reactions instead of showing up authentically, you're not really being loved, a version of you is being tolerated. Setting boundaries is not a rejection of others, it's a commitment to yourself. It may mean limiting contact with people who drain you, walking away from emotionally unavailable partners, or clearly communicating your emotional needs without apology. It can be difficult at first, especially if you're used to defining yourself through how helpful, accommodating, or easy to be with you are. But over time, boundaries become liberating. They help you reclaim your power and teach others how to treat you. They also create space for healthier, more authentic relationships to emerge. Growth in this context also involves letting go of the fantasy that you can change someone through your love. Many people stay in emotionally unfulfilling relationships because they believe that if they just love enough, wait long enough, or prove their worth, the other person will eventually become who they need. This hope is often rooted in trauma and unmet childhood needs, not reality. True healing happens when you accept people for who they are, not for who you wish they could become, and when you recognize that your well-being is not worth sacrificing for the possibility of future change. The journey of growth through self-worth and boundary setting is deeply personal. It often involves grieving not just for the relationships that no longer serve you, but for the version of yourself that accepted less than you deserved. You may feel guilt for walking away, sadness for time lost, or fear about being alone. These feelings are normal, but they are also signs that you are waking up to your own value. With each step you take toward honoring your needs, the fear begins to shrink, and the self-trust begins to grow. Education and self-awareness are essential tools in this process. Learning about attachment styles, emotional availability, trauma responses, and relational dynamics gives language to the experiences you've been through. It empowers you to notice patterns, make informed choices, and identify what a healthy relationship actually looks like. Knowledge becomes a foundation for self-compassion. You realize that you weren't weak or naive for falling for emotionally unavailable people. You were doing what felt familiar, trying to heal old wounds. And now that you understand those patterns, you have the power to break them. Ultimately, growth is not just about avoiding toxic relationships, it's about cultivating the inner strength to choose better ones. It's about aligning with people who meet you with the same level of presence, openness, and effort that you offer. When you know your worth, you no longer chase love that hurts or settle for connections that leave you lonely. You wait for and welcome love that feels peaceful, secure, and nourishing. In conclusion, self, worth, and boundaries are not just personal traits, they are skills, and they can be developed. They form the foundation of emotional health and relational maturity. As you grow in these areas, you'll find that the need to prove your value fades, and the ability to receive genuine, mutual love takes its place. This is the transformation that turns pain into wisdom and longing into empowered choice. It's not easy, but it's always worth it.